Right now, I want to talk about the world 100 years ago. In 1913, cars looked like this. It's hard to get high-definition photos from 1913. But a lot of people also got around by horse and buggy. Information was sent from one person to another through the mail. And phone usage was limited since coast-to-coast long-distance calls had not yet been invented or not yet feasible. And electricity was provided primarily by large steam turbine-powered generators over transmission lines that connected power stations in cities. And the companies that provided this were large utilities regulated by the states. Today, cars look like this. It's a Tesla. Information can be sent from one person to another in real time. Phones can now make international calls, and they can allow video chats. And electricity is provided primarily by large steam turbine-powered generators over transmission lines that connect power stations in cities. And the companies that provide it are primarily large utilities regulated by the states. Why is it that every other technology-related aspect of our lives seems to have changed and evolved in the past 100 years, yet we are still stuck with the same electricity distribution model that was alive in 1913? Although electricity distribution has changed very little in the past 100 years, the status quo is now being challenged by emerging technologies and approaches. Looks very challenging, that picture. These new approaches are highly disruptive and could change the way that people receive and employ energy over the coming decades, over the coming few years. The question isn't if this will happen, but when, and whether society will embrace this transition or deny the future in order to protect a 100-year-old status quo. I work for a company that many of you have likely heard of, SolarCity. Oh, this is the status quo. SolarCity. We make clean energy options such as solar, energy efficiency, EV charging stations available to everybody, homeowners, schools, businesses, nonprofits, the government. What we offer costs less than purchasing conventional energy from a utility, like energy generated by coal, natural gas, nuclear. We've revolutionized the way that energy is delivered by giving customers a cleaner and more affordable alternative to their traditional bill. And we are an energy company that transcends utility boundaries. Let's talk about just solar for one moment. The sun produces more energy in 1 hour than the entire world's population consumes in a year. Benefiting from all of that energy is simply a matter of harnessing it. Luckily for us, the average cost of a PV system has decreased almost 30% just in the past year. The solar market grew 76% from 2011 to 2012. And there are now more than 119,000 solar workers in the country, which is more than all of the coal mining jobs in the United States. In 2012, solar electric installations were valued at $11.5 billion. This isn't a cottage industry anymore. As consumers realize they have the ability to write their own energy future and their own energy destiny, they're going to want to start having control over all of their energy usage. And recognizing this, SolarCity expanded into offering energy efficiency services in 2010. So now, not only do we sell you cheaper electricity, but we also help you use less of it. And what about the other high energy consuming portion of most people's lives, their car? Fossil fuels are a finite resource, and at some point in the very near future, we're going to switch from a transportation that burns oil to one that uses some other form of energy. And one already proven source of power is, of course, the sun. Electric vehicle charging stations are up and running in many states, and SolarCity has already installed about 2,000 of these systems. And finally, the holy grail of energy, battery storage, is becoming more and more advanced every day. SolarCity has led pilot projects to deploy storage in conjunction with solar panels, and at some point in the near future, it's conceivable that every home or business could be self-sufficient islands of energy usage and production just using the technologies that I've discussed, as well as potentially wind, geothermal, maybe some that haven't been invented yet, maybe some that haven't been announced yet. These technologies, solar, EV charging stations, and battery storage, are not some idealized vision of the future. They're all happening right now. And this new paradigm of energy provision is disrupting this status quo. Change is hard, and we all know that, but we're at the point where we have to decide if we want to make it harder on ourselves or if we want to embrace and pursue this new energy future. I'd say the biggest detractors of this paradigm shift are understandably the monopoly utilities who have been providing people with electricity in the same way for over 100 years, and whose revenues and livelihood are threatened by emerging technologies and energy provision options. Navigant Consulting has observed that the changes underway in the 21st century electric power sector create a level and complexity of risks that is perhaps unprecedented in the industry's history. Some quick background: most utilities can earn money in two primary ways. The first is through energy sales. The more they sell, the more they make, and vice versa. The second is by earning a rate of return on investments they make in transmission and distribution lines and generating assets. The more they spend on those things, the higher their returns on their investments. This means that it is not in their best interest to either encourage the conservation of electricity or limit the investments they have to make in various assets by facilitating the building of assets that they don't own, regardless of what is best or least cost for ratepayers. So what do you do when you see your revenues decreasing and your customers choosing to acquire energy through alternative means? You attack those disruptive technologies that are the source of the problem. And this is what we've seen. Utilities are by far the biggest obstacle to the widespread adoption of technologies such as solar and energy efficiency. They object to these technologies because it competes with their sales, with their revenues, with their bottom line. This discussion isn't about concern for their customers. If they really were concerned, they would want their customers to have options, lower cost options. What this really is about is a concern for their bottom line. The monopolies don't have to compete with anyone, and they have never had to learn how to decrease their prices. Instead of lowering their costs when revenues are reduced like any regular business would do, they just ask their regulators for more money. If homes install solar or pursue energy efficiency measures or have a kid go off to college and then they use less energy, the utilities have the audacity to ask the homeowners to pay what they were paying previously as though they were entitled to that revenue. At the moment, utilities are focusing most of their efforts on rolling back a critical solar policy called net metering. I'm sure most of you have heard of net metering. It's a pretty straightforward billing arrangement that ensures solar customers receive a fair credit for the unused electricity that their systems generate. Numerous studies have found that the use of this policy results in net benefits for the entire electricity rate base. A recent study in California found that these benefits added up to $92 million a year. However, as I just discussed, the fact that this policy saves ratepayers money doesn't mean that the utilities are supportive of it. Many utilities are calling this policy, which provides customers with a fair credit for their energy and which benefits all ratepayers, a cost shift or a subsidy, and they're now attempting to roll this policy back or charge customers an additional fee for installing solar. They will do anything they can to negatively affect solar's value proposition so that they don't have any competition within their territory. And this is likely just one of the many attempts we'll see by utilities to limit the adoption of disruptive technologies. They're concerned that individuals are increasing the amount of the grid powered by private investment. And they want to penalize anyone who uses their personal capital and not utility capital to lessen their dependence on a clearly outdated and expensive system of energy provision. As far as we see it, utilities stand at a crossroads right now. They can either continue to fight what is ultimately inevitable, which is a shift from centralized energy production and distribution to a totally new energy paradigm, or they can embrace this shift and innovate and find new ways to serve the needs of their customers. They have the opportunity right now to make a decision to evolve in such a way that allows them to move away from capital-intense services, such as power generation, and try to benefit from the disruptive technologies that are causing them such heartache. However, the more they push back on these new forms of energy provision, the more obsolete they will become. Utilities in other countries where renewable generation is significantly higher are already starting to fundamentally rethink their business models. In the future, utilities may look more like grid managers than generators. And if they could start moving away from charging for kilowatt hours and toward charging for quality of service and reliability. A number of thought leaders are already thinking about these problems and starting to reimagine the role of the utility. Arizona State University, which is close by here, I recommend visiting. There's a beautiful campus. They have their own Utility of the Future Center. And that's designed to help utilities, regulators, consumers make the move away from traditional forms of energy and the 100-year-old status quo to a clean energy future. But the stuff of think tanks is already out there and on the ground, ready to change the world. Cars are faster than horses and buggies. An iPhone is a quantum leap ahead of the first landline telephones. And we're on the cusp of leaving behind last century's energy status quo for something cleaner, more efficient, and more affordable. And as numerous forces conspire to make the next 2 decades extremely difficult for traditional utilities, we and they will need to recognize that the energy landscape is changing, and it's changing quickly. It's up to us to figure out how to address those challenges and changes, and whether we want to put scarce resources into fighting what is inevitable, fighting for the status quo, or embracing our transition to a new, cleaner, and more productive energy system. In doing so, we all need to ask ourselves, what is our energy future, and how are we going to make it happen? Thank you.